Hello and welcome back to the DIVEBOMB Power Rankings podcast. Dan is unfortunately away this week, but I am joined as ever by Owen Bradley.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
And our guest for this episode, Apostolos Papageorgiou.
Hello, everyone.
We start the podcast as ever with the Formula One recap from the previous month. We start off the month with the British Grand Prix at Silverstone, and straight away in qualifying, it was a surprising Carlos Sainz first pole of the season. He's come close so many times so far this season in the title contending Ferrari he's been in, and took the pole on the Saturday, much to lots of fans' delight after a long wait for that. But on the first lap of the Grand Prix, it was a disaster in the midfield with that massive Guan Yu Zhou shunt. I mean, a terrifying accident to see his Alfa Romeo get flipped and then to roll over the barrier as well. An awful crash. George Russell and Alex Albon got caught up in that as well. They were both out. Ocon and Tsunoda were badly damaged, but managed to stay in the race due to the red flag that allowed them to fix their car. Guys, I think what's important with that incident was the halo's impact. How important has it been, and how many lives has it saved?
Yeah, it's been arguably, I don't even think arguably, just one of the best inventions of the modern F1 era. It's already saved so many people's lives. When you think of Romain Grosjean in 2020 in Bahrain, you think of Belgium 2018 with Charles Leclerc, and once again with Zhou Guanyu in Silverstone this year. And like a lot of people, I actually didn't like it at first because it looked visually displeasing, but it's done its job and that's what it's here to do. So of course it's very effective.
Yeah, and I think special mention has to go to the roll bar, because that's the bit that took the most, the front of the damage. And actually, F1 is looking into it to redesign it for next year. So thank God we have that as well on F1 technology for you there.
I think the thing that stands out is the fact that it's come into use so many times since it's been introduced, and you just think, if it's happened so many times in the short time it's been around in F1, you think how many times it could have saved lives in the past. I mean, even the morning of the Guan Yu Zhou crash, there was that horrific Hauger and Nissany shunt in F2. Roy Nissany, or Dennis Hauger, sorry, going flying over the sausage curbs with a punctured tyre, unable to slow down, went right into the halo of Roy Nissany, and obviously no injuries to Roy Nissany because he was completely protected by the halo. I think it's an incredible invention. I'm so glad it's there. And to be honest, when I look at cars pre-2018, I don't even like the look of them now. I prefer the look of the cars with the halo, if I'm honest.
Well, I used to think the Halo looked ugly too, but I mean, it's also odd now seeing cars without it, especially modern ones. It's literally like something is missing. So it has been integrated rather well, and of course it saves lives, so we have to have it.
Yeah, like just imagine if this didn't go ahead and all of these incidents had taken place the way they have. We could be in a very scary situation without the halo right now. So yeah, as you guys have said, thank God we've had it, and it's a weird one because I hope it doesn't have to save any more lives because they shouldn't be put in that position. But at the same time, we do need it still.
And moving on, Sainz managed to convert his pole into a win for the first time in his career. I think it was his 150th Grand Prix as well. Of course, he did benefit from Verstappen picking up damage and finishing 7th. Without it, it's very easy to assume he would have won. It was a typical Ferrari disaster class as well. Despite being clearly the fastest car all weekend, or at least the fastest with Red Bull, they received threat from Lewis Hamilton too. and decided, rather strangely, not to pit Leclerc under the safety car for new softs. Of course, he already had wing damage, and he fell down the order to at least a salvageable 4th place.
Looking at the Austrian Grand Prix, we had another sprint race, which was, well, it was very interesting because the Mercedes in the qualifying before the sprint race had a double crash. There was Lewis Hamilton, who crashed in the beginning of Sector 3, and there was Russell, who crashed on the exit of the final corner, sort of lost it mid-corner or just going into the apex, which was very interesting. And unfortunately, we did hear quite a lot of cheering because of the Red Bull fans at that circuit. I mean, it is literally called the Red Bull Ring. And of course, to Red Bull fans' delight, Max Verstappen also got pole for the sprint race, but Charles Leclerc was faster, but he just ran out of laps, and Max did manage to win the sprint race, and that put him on pole for the main race, the Grand Prix.
And it was all action on lap 1, with George Russell and Sergio Perez colliding at turn 4 in basically in the identical way that Hamilton and Albon did at the safety car restart of the 2020 season opener. And just like Hamilton received 5 seconds, so did George Russell, though he still made a great recovery to 4th place, right behind his teammate.
Come the end of the race, it was Leclerc who got the better of Max Verstappen. What happened in the sprint, or what was a theme of the sprint, of Leclerc having the upper hand on the Dutchman, continued on into the race, and the Ferrari man took the win. For me, when you watch Max, when he doesn't seem like he's going to win, when he doesn't seem like he has it, you can just tell that it's not going to go his way. And that was the case in Austria. He seemed desperate, he seemed like he was struggling, and that was the case. Leclerc won. Carlos Sainz, meanwhile, had a big fiery engine blowout. At first, it was, not again, Ferrari reliability, but then it suddenly turned to, oh my god, is he going to get out of the car? It was quite a sudden fireball in his Ferrari, but he was fine in the end. In France, it was Ferrari having the pace once again. Leclerc took a pole, which we haven't seen much of this year, although Leclerc has been better in quali than Max, but the Red Bull's pace has improved and he hasn't been able to get the better of Max in quali due to that increased pace of the Red Bull. Ferrari are kind of turning the tide a little bit now, and Leclerc evidently showed that, taking pole in France. However, in the race, it was a very, very rare and uncommon mistake from Charles Leclerc. We see him as a very flawless driver often, although mistakes are creeping into his game. He crashed from the lead of the French Grand Prix on lap 17. Just an unforced error, obviously, on degrading tyres and struggling tyres, but still, it is not ideal to see the championship protagonist crash like that. And I have a good stat for you. He was the first driver to crash from the lead in the dry in 17 years.
And of course, Ferrari's day got even worse because as much as Leclerc bottled it, they also screwed over Sainz with the pit stops because of an unsafe release. He got a 5-second penalty. Of course, he also started from the very back of the grid due to an engine penalty. And as I said, he got an unsafe release, which added 5 seconds onto his time. He managed to work his way through the field, got up to 3rd. He was actually in a great battle with Sergio Perez, and the team were on the radio to him just saying, "Oh, pit now, pit now." And he's in the middle of a fight. It was ridiculous. And he could have used just coming in before he got into that battle, but instead they decided to let him fight for position and then call him in afterwards, giving him less time to actually recover, less laps to even try and recover. So, the Ferrari disaster class.
Fast forwarding a week to Hungary, and Red Bull really had a troublesome qualifying, with Sergio Perez not being able to get a clean lap and having to start from 11th place. Meanwhile, Verstappen did progress, but had an engine issue and could only manage 10th. But the big news was the unexpected pole position, without any purple sectors, may I add, of George Russell, who, starting on the soft compound tyre, launched away well at the start and kept the lead for quite some time until the first round of stops from Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc, who were admittedly on the slower mediums, but it's still a great feat for Mercedes. It's great to see them come back. And of course, in yet another shambolic race for Ferrari, as it turned out, they decided to pit Leclerc, rather to have a cut that. And in another, damn it. Okay, from the top. It was yet again another case of the Ferrari disaster class, I'm afraid. Ferrari pitting Leclerc from the medium to the hard compound and then again to the softs. For seemingly no good reason, as it turned out, he finished P6 behind Perez and Verstappen, who went on to win. And, well, Sainz, he did salvage fourth, but he was passed by Hamilton.
Well, speaking of Lewis Hamilton, he has absolutely capitalised on a lot of the field's mistakes. You know, Red Bull have had some engine problems this season. Ferrari have certainly had some engine problems and especially some strategy problems. And Lewis Hamilton once again capitalised to a strong P2 finish in Hungary, with his stint going from medium to soft. It was a very class drive, really, and it's what he's been doing the whole season. He's just seemed so sorry, not the whole season, but over the last few races, he's really got into his own, and he's found some consistency with the car. The car's had some upgrades, and it looks like potentially for the second half of this season, Mercedes could be a real force to be reckoned with. But someone who is not even a force to be reckoned with is Max Verstappen, because he has just pulled out such a gap. He went from 10th place after a dreadful qualifying, and he ended up winning the race despite starting 10th and a spin. He still won this race, and it's looking like Max Verstappen's championship could already be won.
Going into Hungary on Thursday, we always had the shock of Sebastian Vettel announcing his retirement. Obviously, there was the big build-up to it. There's a lot of anticipation of what his announcement was going to be. Obviously, he joined social media, which he's never done in the past, whereas everyone else has. And then we woke up Thursday morning to find out he was announcing his retirement. And then the aftermath of that was, of course, going to be the initial rumours of his replacement. We had Nick de Vries being a big candidate for it, and lots of rumours about that. Nico Hulkenberg was being suggested as someone to come back and get the seat. And then we woke up just this morning, Monday morning, just because of the time we're recording this, and we were told that Fernando Alonso, of all people, would be replacing Sebastian Vettel at Aston Martin. It was a very surprising announcement. I don't think anyone saw it coming. What do we think? Will Fernando Alonso be a good fit at the Aston Martin team?
Well, I mean, it is Fernando Alonso. We know he can basically get in a car and get everything out of it, but he'll definitely have to do that at Aston Martin. But based on their current results and last year's, it's it really is a weird case. I mean, it was definitely unexpected, even more so than the Vettel retirement news. And it will definitely be interesting to see how it turns out.
Well, what's interesting is that what I've heard is Alpine apparently didn't want to offer Fernando Alonso a longer term contract, more than maybe about a year, probably due to his age and knowing, or Alpine knowing that he could retire at any moment. So why would they want to invest that kind of a future with him? But for Fernando, this is such a weird team to join, because currently Alpine sit fourth in the standings, a very, very respectable fourth, and Aston Martin sit ninth on just 20 points. It's such a weird decision for Fernando. I don't think anyone saw it coming, because I don't think anyone understood it or understands it. It's, yeah, a very weird decision. I don't know. It seems like a losing decision on Alonso's side, because Aston Martin will get all the PR for a double world champion. But for Fernando, within the next few years, I can definitely see him retiring, sadly.
Well, just to add on this, it's definitely for him, for Alonso, a long-term project. Well, admittedly, like Alpine was, but it is said that with all the new team members that are on gardening leave for Aston Martin right now, from Mercedes and Red Bull, and with them building new facilities, a new wind tunnel, I think, a new factory, maybe, for 2024, it's definitely a slightly wiser bet than we're making it out to be, but it's still a risk, definitely, especially because Alonso will be like around 45 at that time, so who knows? It's a very interesting choice indeed.
Yeah, as you say, Aston Martin, the momentum looks to be swinging in their direction for the future, but as of right now, they've had Sebastian Vettel join their team, and he's not been able to really accomplish too much outside of a podium in 2021. It's such a weird decision, but who knows? Maybe this is a long-term investment for him, but he can't carry on forever. As sad as that is, he's already 41, I believe. Just had his birthday that weekend, and it's looking like he still wants to invest in a long-term team. But I don't know if he'll be around that much longer, is the only worry I have for Fernando.
We now move on to the IndyCar. It was a very busy month, but I won't tell you about it. Dan will. He isn't here, but he has recorded us a little recap of the IndyCar this month, so I will hand over to Dan now.
Yes, I'm back, Dan, a couple of days before everyone else is recording the rest of the podcast to discuss what happened in IndyCar in the month of July. And yet again, as always the case, another cracking month in IndyCar. 5 races, including road, street, and oval races. So we've had the whole combo in July. So we kicked off fairly early on in the month at Mid-Ohio. And Pato O'Ward, he took pole, which meant we had 9 pole sitters in the first 9 races of 2022. Obviously, that streak ended the next race, but we didn't talk about that. It was still a remarkable streak. It was very cool to see. But O'Ward and Aaron McLaren SP's delight on Saturday would turn into despair on Sunday, with a double disaster of Felix Rosenqvist retiring early on from P3 with a mechanical failure, and Pato O'Ward, who was leading for a long period in the race, gradually losing more and more power from the lead, which resulted in a retirement. A dismal day for O'Ward, Rosenqvist, and Aaron McLaren SP. Another bad day was for Andretti Autosport. Their drivers were colliding everywhere. Rossi and Grosjean collided 2 times. Herta was colliding with Grosjean. They were all hitting each other. You would have had no idea they were teammates, by the way. They were bashing into each other all day long. An absolutely dreadful day for Andretti, along with McLaren. But it was a good day for Scott McLaughlin. He claimed his 2nd victory in the IndyCar series after picking up his maiden win in St. Petersburg earlier in the year. Similar to that race, Alex Palou finished P2 behind him, and despite an early spin, Will Power rounded off the podium in Mid-Ohio. We then went across the border for the first time in 3 years. We were back in Toronto for IndyCar's only abroad race every year, and it was Colton Herta who became the first repeat pole sitter in 2022, but he would only finish P2 as Scott Dixon took victory, and he equals Mario Andretti in P2 for the all-time win list in IndyCar. Do we think he can get the record before the time he retires. It's going to be a tough ask, but we'll certainly see. And it was Dixon's first victory in over a year. Can you believe that for a man so dominant and consistent in the series? Quite the remarkable feat. As I said, Colton Herta finished P2, and Felix Rosenqvist picked up his first podium for Arrow McLaren SP. Obviously, his seat is up in the air for next season. We'll get onto that a bit later on. But he did claim his first podium for McLaren, and there are a bit more rumours we might see him next year. We then headed off to Iowa for a double-header weekend, the only one this season, and a return to Iowa actually after it was not on the schedule last year. So, as we have for over races, the double weekends, we have 2 laps for qualifying. The first lap sets the grid for race 1, and lap 2 sets the grid for race 2. And it was Will Power who managed to take pole for both races. And both races, there was a very similar story, with Newgarden, Power, and O'Ward the dominant 3 in both races. Newgarden cruised to victory though in race 1. He finished ahead of O'Ward and then Power. And race 2, it was the same 3, as I said, dominating again. But the huge drama, as long-time race leader, Joseph Newgarden crashed out after a mechanical failure from the lead. That gave Pato O'Ward a simple route to victory, and he finished ahead of Power, and Scott McLaughlin finished P3. And then to round off the month, we went to Indianapolis for the double-header weekend with NASCAR, and it was a surprise pole for Felix Rosenqvist, who also took his second pole of the year after Texas. And there was a huge drama for his fellow Swede in the grid. Marcus Ericsson, the championship leader, lined up last after engine issues over the weekend. And there was even more drama at the start where another championship contender, Pato O'Ward, was spun out by a combination of Will Power and Colton Herta. And Herta would have his own drama later on in the race when he retired from the lead midway through with what seemed to be a gearbox problem. That gave Alexander Rossi his first victory in 3 years in his final season for Andretti Autosport, and it seems like it will be his last win for Andretti before he moves to Arrow McLaren SP for 2022. Christian Lundgaard, he started here last year, qualifying P4 on the road horse in his debut race. He finished an excellent P2 for Rahul Lanigan. It was a very surprising P2. No one could really see it coming, but it's nice to see the XF2 driver, the young gun of IndyCar, coming to P2. And Will Power claimed his 4th podium this month, finishing P3. Championship contenders didn't have as much of a good day. Newgarden was a respectable P5 with Dixon P8, but Pelot, Ericsson and O'Ward finished 10th, 11th and 12th respectively. Not the greatest day for either of them. Yes, there was one bit of news which not only gripped the IndyCar world, but the entire motorsport world. A very, very dramatic and bizarre scenario involving reigning champion Alex Pelot. So for context, Chip Ganassi Racing, his current team, had announced that Pelot was staying on with the team for 2023 and gave a quote with it supposedly from Pelot saying he was excited to carry on for next year. Then Pelot, a couple of hours later, as we all do, took to Twitter and said, "This quote is fake, I did not say this quote, and I'm leaving Chip Ganassi at the end of the season, and they know I've told them that I was going to leave." Which was shocking in itself. And then minutes later, McLaren Racing, not Arrow McLaren SP, McLaren Racing, announced they had signed Pelot for 2023. So effectively, Pelot got signed for 2 different teams within the space of a couple of hours. Now, McLaren haven't said the series they place them in, so it could theoretically be Formula E, F1, or IndyCar with Arrow McLaren SP. And now Chip Ganassi started a court case against Pelot, saying that he shouldn't be joining McLaren. So we have this sort of mess where we don't know where Pelot will be racing next year, because Chip Ganassi think they've signed him, but McLaren think they've signed him. So it's a bit of a mess who's currently got the rights to Alex Pelot for next season. Now, currently, I'm not sure Alex Pelot will be racing in IndyCar next year due to this situation. It is such a mess, and it's going to take a long, long time to resolve. It's going to be for the courts to decide who Alex Pelot will be racing for in 2023. And Chip Ganassi Racing have effectively ended the chances of Pelot's championship push this year because they're limiting his access to data, and it's all become a bit of a mess, really. So we'll see in the upcoming months how that is resolved, as it is quite the story. I don't think I've ever seen anything like it in any other series. Only IndyCar can have this sort of ridiculous stuff.
Next up then, it is the Formula E. It was another busy month. 3 venues, 2 of them double headers, so we got 5 races this month in Formula E. Starting off on the 2nd of the month, Marrakesh E-Prix, returning to sub in for the Vancouver mess of an E-Prix that was cancelled due to the organisers doing some dodgy illegal stuff. Antonio Felix da Costa started off the month well, taking pole in Marrakesh. Obviously, he's got a lot more experience than some of the new drivers that's been on the calendar in previous years, but not since the COVID seasons. In the end, Eduardo Mortara took the lead off of Da Costa and took the win as well. Mitch Evans rounded off the podium in 3rd as Da Costa held on to 2nd. 2 weeks after that, in the middle of July, we had the New York double header in the Brooklyn Docklands. Nick Cassidy took a double pole. It is a bit odd. Nick Cassidy, he's always there or thereabouts, just kind of doing his own thing, in or out the points throughout the season, and then he chooses one double header where he shows up and has insane pace. Last year was the Rome E-Prix, he took pole in similar fashion, spun out the lead on the first lap slow, which was a little bit embarrassing for the Kiwi, but this time he took double pole and made no mistake in taking the win, although it wasn't without a bit of distress towards the end of race 1. A sudden change of weather and an immense downfall hit the track. None of the drivers saw it coming. It had been dry all race, and then suddenly a cloud just developed over the circuit and it flooded with rain, and 3 of the top 4 all aquaplaned off at the same corner at the same time into the same runoff and crashed into each other. A very, very scary accident. The race was red flagged, but then the running order was, luckily for the front runners that crashed, counted back and the race was not restarted. So those who had crashed luckily kept their results. So a stroke of good luck. Those behind who inherited positions would not have been happy, but I guess it is understandable. They were not to blame for the incident. Nick Cassidy obviously took the win. Lucas Di Grassi was in 2nd, and Robin Freitz got a podium in P3. The second race was fully dry in comparison, although despite getting pole, Nick Cassidy was disqualified from quali due to changing his survival cell that was damaged in the crash the day before. Antonio Felix da Costa won, Stoffel van Dorn was P2, and Mitch Evans had a great drive despite a half spin whilst racing Nick De Vries to come P3 for the second time that month. And then just yesterday and the weekend just gone, we had the London E-Prix, an absolute thrilling event. I was in attendance myself. In race 1, home hero who won there last year, Jake Dennis, had a Grand Slam win. The pole in the morning, much to the fans' delight, the crowd cheering him on every lap he set. It was a brilliant drive from start to finish, and he took the win. Had Stoffel van Dorn under wraps, which not a lot of Formula E drivers incredible this year. And then P3 was Nick Cassidy again. Finished P4 on track when he was racing Nick De Vries quite tightly for that podium spot. Nick De Vries got a post-race 5-second for his robust defence against Nick Cassidy, and Cassidy took the podium while De Vries got demoted down to P6. Sergio Sette Camara, is worth noting, had a brilliant quali. He qualified P4 in his Dragon Penske, but energy miscalculations and just a poor energy management throughout the race, which is a running theme for Dragon's season, lost him his points. He finished way down the points with a lack of energy at the end. Race 2, Dennis was on pole again, even more comfortably than the day before, and you thought, oh, it's going to be a repeat. He's going to start to finish again, and it's going to be great, but that was not the case. Lucas Di Grassi qualified 2nd after a really, really controversial and unfair disqualification from quali on Saturday. He used his energy perfectly. He stayed near Dennis, used his energy well, and took the win from him. Jake did seem like he was struggling with the rear during the race. That is why he wasn't as dominant as Saturday. And then a heartbreaking moment in the second race was Mitch Evans issues on the final lap. He'd had an incredible drive to make his way all the way up to P4 from, I think, P14 on the grid after a poor quali, which happened both days. And he was running P4, had such a good drive, and his Jaguar broke down in the final laps. A devastating end for Mitch, especially in his tight battle. And who was it to inherit his P4 but his rival, Stoffel Van Dorn? Brutal stuff. Nick De Vries ran off the podium in P3.
And just like his teammate the day before, Antonio Giovinazzi, again driving for Dragon Penske, went really well in qualifying, rather surprisingly, managed to make it to the duels, not just in the quarterfinals. I don't actually remember who he beat, but he did beat him and reached the semi-finals for the first time in his Formula E career, his rather short Formula E career so far, and managed a third-place grid slot for the E3. But unfortunately, a penalty for power overuse, I think, was in the race, drove him down and out of points contention. Though it was not all bad news for Dragon. Sergio City Camera drove brilliantly that race and finished P9, Dragon's first points of the year. And we now move on to the WRC. Well, things went smoothly there, unless if you're Craig Breen. Now, despite leading after stage 1, the rather short blast through, I don't remember what it was really, but he did lead. He showed that he had good pace, running in 4th in the first 2 Friday morning stages, but sadly he went wide in a corner on stage 4, and his rally was practically over from there. But it's not all doom and gloom at Ford. Adrien Fourmeau, the Frenchman, finally made it into the top 6 after nearly 12 months of absence, having his first properly clean rally of the year. Takamoto Katsuta, I should say, also deserves a mention. Another strong showing after his Kenya podium in 5th. Hyundai had an uneventful rally, none of them suffering any real issues during the race, but they were still quite a bit off the pace from the Toyotas. Trevor Neville in 4th and home hero Oitanak, sadly to the fans' dismay, in 3rd. Eflin Evans led most of day 1, but he fell to 2nd, and he stayed there. And guess who inherited the lead? Yes, for the 3rd time in 4 rallies, Kalle Rovanperä swept in on Friday afternoon, took the lead, and never looked back. He created around a minute gap and dominated proceedings from there.
Now we have the main event, the moment you've all been waiting for, our July power rankings. We start off straight away at number 10, a man we didn't really mention in the recap earlier, Enzo Fittipaldi. I think his performances are going a little bit under the radar this year. A former Ferrari Driver Academy man, he's in a Charouz in F2 this year, and he is performing incredibly. In July alone, 2 sprint race P3s and 2 feature race P2s in a Charouz. That is incredible. One of the highest point scorers in F2 this month, and that has put him 4th in the championship. We were very fond of his performances, and we had to put him on the list at number 10. Following up straight after at number 9 is Isaac Hadjar. He's really come to light this month in Formula 3. There wasn't a clear championship leader previously. Victor Martin was showing a lot of promise, he still is. But Isaac Hadjar was incredible in July. A Britain sprint race win in Silverstone, and then in the Red Bull Ring, he took the pole, the fastest lap, and the win, and the championship lead. The French Algerian now is joint top of the championship with his countryman Victor Martins, and we'll see how that championship fight goes as we enter the final few rounds of the Formula 3 season.
And slotting into 8th is Logan Sargeant, who had a great start to the month with both pole position and the win in Silverstone. He did have a great comeback drive in Austria to finish P4, which eventually became the race win after the penalties were applied to the others. He did get pole position in France, but that stall in the pits and his average performances in Hungary do bring his score down.
In 7th is our first IndyCar driver on the list. That's right, there are more. And it is Scott McLaughlin at number 7. He topped the month a few months earlier, I think in February, and he's back on the list at number 7 now. He took the win in Mid-Ohio, the first race of the month, and then didn't really have much to show for in Toronto, but in the Iowa doubleheader, he was P3 in the second race, and then followed up with P4 at the Indianapolis GP following that. Number 6, we mentioned him earlier in the Formula E segment, the one and only Formula E driver in this month, Antonio Felix da Costa. He took the pole in the first race in Marrakesh and converted into P2, unable to get the win, but Edo Mortara is a force to be reckoned with when he's on form. Then at the next round in New York, he didn't really have anything to brag about in the first race, but race 2, he took the win. Since then, in the London double, I took P7 and P5, and we put him lovely in 6th for Antonio Felix da Costa.
Right in the middle of our list, in 5th, is Kalle Rovanperä. A complete domination in the WRC this year from him. He, of course, dominated Rally Estonia, as he's done others in the past few months, and is now sitting nearly 100 points ahead of the second-place driver in the standings, with a mammoth 6 rallies remaining. That is slightly less than half the season.
Number 4, the top 4 spots now. It is the second and final IndyCar driver on the list. We referred to him earlier. It is the championship leader, Will Power. He has been Mr. Consistent in July, and it's no wonder he is top of the standings. In the first race of the month at Mid-Ohio, it was P3 for the Aussie. At the Iowa doubleheader, a double pole for the Penske man. Will Power then convert that into a double podium again. Another P3 to add to his collection, and P2 as well. Then, at the final race of the month, the Indianapolis GP, it was another 3rd place. So Will Power finishes the month as the championship leader with 2 poles, two 3rd places, and a 2nd place as well.
And coming in 3rd, making the podium, is Théo Pourchaire. The Frenchman had a string of P2 finishes in the feature races, both Silverstone and Paul Ricard, as well as a 2nd place in the sprint race in Austria. And last time out in Hungary, he did win the feature race to put him 2nd, 30-something points behind Felipe Drugovich, who's been leading the championship.
I guess the question really is, guys, is Théo Pourchaire actually F1 worthy material?
I think
That depends.
there, but I just think I don't see it happening for me. He's an immensely talented driver. He's shown that at such a young age. He came 2nd in F3 at the tender age of 17. He started that season when he was 16 years old. And we see a lot of drivers entering F3 at a young age, but the fact that he did so well at that age was even more impressive. Made his F2 debut last year, took feature race wins, especially at Monaco as well. That was incredible. Finished 5th in the championship, and he's a title protagonist this season. He's closing up to Drugovich. This was an incredibly strong month. He looked like he was falling off in the early stages, but he is now closing the gap back to the Brazilian, who has been incredibly consistent in the MP Motorsport. But I don't know. I don't see it. Alfa have got a good driver already in Valtteri Bottas, and of course, Guan Yu Zhou. His results aren't showing it. His championship position doesn't reflect it, but his pace is good. He's rarely in the points, but he's always near them and around them. Obviously, that's no good to the team, but they'll know that he has the good pace that they'll be looking for. Maybe even if Pourchaire brings in more Joe brings in more money, and that will obviously be a factor as well.
I think it will definitely depend on how both Joe and even Bottas go on in both this year and next year, because they've both been good and sometimes even great, but as we've seen even this month alone, the driver market is an insane place. It's a hot debate right now, and it will definitely continue to be with all these young talent. And Theo, well, he's definitely a protagonist for one seat.
Coming in at number 2, exactly where he finished in the 2021 F1 Championship, it's Lewis Hamilton, because he has had some exceptional results as of recently. He had 2 third places at both his home track, Silverstone, and in Austria, and he had 2 second places as well in France and Hungary. And especially, I think, France and Hungary, those 2 second places, had Max had an issue or something, he would have been there to capitalise and maybe even won the race. Unfortunately, that hasn't quite happened for the Mercedes driver. But I think the question does have to come up, guys, is, was Lewis Hamilton ever gone?
Well, we did even do a whole article about it at some point, I think, in the last month, by yours truly. Well, it's a bit weird because I think after Baku, Hamilton said that he hopes the experimental setups are done, and looks like they have, because ever since he's been on a 5-race podium streak. I mean, of course, he has benefited from Ferrari doing the usual things with strategy, whatever they do these days, and maybe the old Red Bull DNF, but generally, he's been there.
I'll be honest, I'm not a Lewis Hamilton fan. At the start of the season, I thought, oh, this is a little bit embarrassing now that he doesn't have a good car. He is falling off. He's not doing well. But obviously, it is now obvious now that he's back in equal machinery. Now Mercedes are really closing back up to the top 2. He is back, and I don't think he was ever gone now, to be honest. I think, opinions definitely changed. My opinions changed. I think people thought he was getting a little bit exposed at the start of this season, but I mean, what he's doing at the moment, the form he's in, is just doing exactly the opposite. And obviously, it is proven that he is a 7-time champion for a good reason.
Yeah, of course, he has been on this exceptional run of results. But another question I want to put to you guys is, do you think he will finally win a race this season and maintain his record of winning in every season he's competed in? Or do we think that maybe this still is the first championship where he will be winless?
Yeah, I definitely think he'll get a win. Maybe it'll be probably in a wild race, or there'll definitely be DNS for the Red Bull and Ferraris. But yeah, if we're at this point of the season with the car he's had and he's got these results, then it's almost inevitable, at least one.
Coming in at number 1, exactly where he also finished in the 2021 F1 Championship, it is Max Verstappen. Just because in the month of July, he had a lot of unfortunate problems in Britain because of damage to his car. He was literally driving with half a car, and he still managed to finish in the points. In Austria, he got the pole position, but unfortunately was unable to convert it into a win. He won in France due to Charles Leclerc's mistake, but you could argue that Max might have overtaken him once Leclerc had made his pit stop. So we were up for a great fight, which unfortunately didn't quite happen. And in Hungary, I mean, that drive alone from 10th to 1st, and a spin in there as well, just for the fun of it. I mean, there was no other person that could go up for first place, especially when you consider the competition, such as the Ferrari boys, which have not been doing as good. So, speaking of the Ferrari boys and the championship, is the championship all signed, sealed, and delivered? Is it Max Verstappen's? What do you guys think?
After France, when Leclerc crashed out from the lead, people were saying, "Oh, it's all over now. It's all over. It's Max's championship to lose, and he's not going to. It's all over for Leclerc now. There's no chance of him coming back." I was sceptical because I still think the pendulum was swinging in Ferrari's favour. Their pace is definitely on the rise, and they are coming closer to Red Bull in performance. But as that's happened, the amount of races they're away due to bad strategies is increasing tenfold. I mean, Silverstone, why they didn't pit Leclerc, I have no idea. Obviously, Sainz did take the win, but they could have all won too there. France, Sainz was on for a podium. He might have lost it and he might have come P4, but still, they should have preferred those odds to the odds of pitting onto mediums with not enough time to make up all that lost ground. And yeah, now that after that Hungary race where Ferrari obviously lost Leclerc, big points to Max. Max took the win because he obviously had an incredible drive. I think that's damage that Ferrari can't manage to come back from now. I think I'm very close to now thinking now it's all over for Leclerc. I'm not certain on what the gap is, but it's big, too big. I think now.
I think it's like an 80-point lead currently that Max holds over Charles Leclerc. I mean, Charles Leclerc is literally like 4 or 5 points in front of Sergio Perez. So whilst everyone is focused on the battle between Verstappen and Leclerc, maybe we should actually focus more on Leclerc trying to stay alive and achieve his best championship finish, which would be second, because right now it does look like it could be unlikely. But yeah, it's just a combination, I think, as you said, Ollie, of just the incredible pace of Max Verstappen and Red Bull and the bottle job and the, as Apostolos has mentioned, the disaster class of Ferrari.
Yeah, and that disaster class train does not seem to be slowing down. I mean, they've done it so many races already, and Mattia Binotto comes out to the press and says, "Oh, it's not our strategy. Our car lacked pace, or I don't see why we can't win the last 10 races." Well, yeah, well, have I got news for you, Mr. Binotto? Because I doubt Ferrari can really do anything. I'd be surprised at this point, or rather, I would be surprised if they fall to third in the Constructors' Championship, because that Mercedes certainly does look a lot faster than it did at the start of the year. And Hamilton and Russell definitely are good drivers, and most of all, Mercedes are a way more capable team than Ferrari are. So, next month, well, it's August, and F1 and most other sports do get their summer break. Not the WRC though. We have 2 rallies in August. The first one is this week. You probably start the day after you'll hear this podcast. It's in Finland, the Gravel Grand Prix, where you can expect big jumps, fast cars, and cars wrapped around trees, probably because someone will go off. And after that, we have Rally Belgium, an all-tarmac event. It was introduced last year. It's a great spectacle with a combination of twisty, narrow, and a bit wider roads. So it will be an interesting time for the WRC next month.
We are not short of IndyCar action either. 2 races. The Music City Nashville Grand Prix. It was a thriller last year. Marcus Ericsson took the win after going over the top of another car. And then it's the Gateway race as well at that oval. And even more importantly, the thing you should all be glued to your screens for, the Formula E Season 8 season finale at Seoul. It's a new track. It's almost certainly going to be Stoffel Vandoorne. He's got a 36-point lead over Mitch Evans, who's 5 points or so ahead of Eduardo Mortara. But anything could happen in Formula E, and I'm looking forward to that finale.
F1, F2, and F3 will also join us right at the end of August with the race in my favourite track, Spa in Belgium. But I want to know, boys, what is your favourite track on the F1 calendar for this year?
Well, I have to agree with you. It is Belgium, and it's a shame that it's in the cutting room floor lately. It's been there's rumors that it won't be on the calendar next year, and that'll be a big loss if it happens. We've already lost Paul Ricard. Not too upset about that, but Belgium is a tough one to swallow.
My favourite track that I can't pick one. I'm a big fan of quite a few. You can't put me on the spot like that.
Yeah, sorry, that is my fault. I mean,
No.
there's so many to choose from when you think of it, like Monza and Spa and Zandvoort, even you would throw in there maybe.
You know what? I'll give you one. Imola. There you go. That's my favourite.
An interesting one, a classic though.
Yeah, it's given us some thrillers, but I think that's mainly just because of the weather.
Yeah.
We'll look past that. Anyway, thanks for tuning in, everyone. We really hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe to the Dive Bomb YouTube and follow our Instagram and Twitter at Project Dive Bomb. We will see you next month.